The abandoned farmhouse sat 5 hours from the city on a forgotten stretch of Colorado highway. Paint peeled from its weathered siding like old scars. Windows stared out blankly over fields gone wild. Time and neglect had claimed every inch of the property until only the skeleton remained of what once had been a home. Brian Foster stood in the gravel driveway, staring at his impulse purchase. 3 months ago, this place had appeared on a foreclosure listing. 3 months ago, he needed somewhere to run to. Somewhere far from the memories. Far from the empty bedroom with dinosaur wallpaper he could not bear to enter. Far from the kitchen where her coffee mug still sat exactly where she had left it. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across what remained of the front porch as Brian climbed the creaking steps. Keys jingled in his hand. This was the first time he had returned since signing the paperwork. The property inspector had warned him about extensive repairs needed. Brian had nodded without truly listening. What did it matter if the roof leaked or the plumbing failed? Nothing seemed to matter much these days. He inserted the key into the front door lock, but met no resistance. The door hung slightly ajar. Brian paused. He distinctly remembered locking it when he left. Perhaps the realtor had shown the property again despite the sale. Brian pushed the door open slowly. The hinges protested with a long creak that echoed through the empty house. "Hello?" His voice sounded foreign in the stillness. Something felt wrong. Brian stepped inside, allowing his eyes to adjust to the dimness. The house was supposed to be empty, forgotten, a shell like himself, yet as he stood in the foyer listening intently, something broke the silence. Breathing, soft and rhythmic from the far corner of the living room. Brian moved cautiously across worn floorboards. Behind an overturned table in the corner lay a makeshift bed. A threadbare blanket covered three small forms huddled together on the floor. Blonde curls spilled across bunched-up coats, serving as pillows. For a moment, Brian simply stared uncomprehendingly at the sight of three little girls sleeping in his abandoned farmhouse. His boots scraped against the floor. Instantly, 6 eyes flew open in unison. The children scrambled backward, pressing against the wall in terror. Three identical faces with identical expressions of fear stared up at him. The girl in the middle stood first, positioning herself protectively in front of her sisters. Her chin trembled, but she lifted it defiantly. "Please," she said, her voice cracking with desperation. "We will leave. Just do not call anyone." Brian remained frozen, taking in the sight before him. These were not teenagers seeking thrills in an abandoned house. These were small children. 7 years old at most. Thin faces and worn clothing told a story of neglect long before they spoke a word. "How long have you been here?" Brian asked softly, trying to keep his voice gentle. The girl who stood as their shield swallowed hard. "A few weeks." "A few weeks?" Brian repeated in disbelief. She nodded quickly. "We did not break anything. We were careful. We just needed somewhere dry to sleep." Brian ran a hand through his short brown hair. This situation was beyond anything he had prepared for. He had come seeking isolation, emptiness, a place to nurse his grief in private. Not this. "Where are your parents?" The question seemed to drain something from the girl. Her shoulders sagged visibly, though she maintained her protective stance. "Gone." Gone where? Just gone. The simple finality in her voice struck Brian with unexpected force. He studied the three of them more carefully. Same blonde, curly hair. Same green eyes, wide with terror. Same thin faces speaking of too many missed meals. Only subtle differences in expression distinguished one from another. "What are your names?" he asked. The standing girl hesitated before answering quietly. "Abby." She pointed to the sister on her left. "That Mia." Then to her right, where the smallest one clutched a ratty stuffed rabbit. "And Ivy." "How old are you?" "7," Abby answered. "All of us." "All of you?" "We are triplets," Mia said softly from behind her sister, born 3 minutes apart. Triplets, 7 years old, living in an abandoned farmhouse. The reality of what stood before him began to sink in. Brian crouched down slowly, trying not to frighten them further. "I am Brian. This is my house." "We know," Abby said quickly. "We thought it was abandoned. We did not know anyone was coming back. We will go. Just please do not call the police." The desperation in her voice hit Brian like a physical blow. "Why not?" Tears filled Abby's eyes, though she fought hard not to shed them. "Because we cannot go back. We cannot." Brian felt the air leave his lungs in a rush. He should walk away. Call authorities. Let professionals handle this situation. But looking at these three small girls clinging to each other as if it was the only thing keeping them alive, something inside his chest cracked open. When did you eat last? The girls exchanged glances. We are okay, Abby lied unconvincingly. Brian stood up. I'm going to get food. You stay here. You are not calling anyone? Suspicion filled Abby's voice. I am not calling anyone. Not yet. Just stay here. Brian walked out before they could respond, before he could change his mind, before he could think too hard about what he was doing. The responsible thing would be to call child services immediately. These children needed proper care. Yet something held him back. The terror in their eyes when they mentioned authorities. The way they clung together. The promise in those words. We cannot go back. 40 minutes later, Brian returned with bags from the small diner in town. Burgers, fries, chicken tenders, apple juice boxes. The girls remained exactly where he had left them, huddled together like they expected him to return with police. When they saw the food, their eyes widened. Eat, Brian said, setting the bags down. They needed no further encouragement. They tore into the food with a desperate intensity that confirmed his suspicions. They were starving, abandoned, desperate. Brian sat on the floor across from them, watching them eat, trying to figure out what he was supposed to do next. When they had finished every last fry, Abby wiped her mouth and looked at him. Thank you. You gonna tell me what is really going on? Brian asked gently. Abby looked at her, sisters took a shaky breath and began talking. Their mother, Rachel, had died 6 months ago after a long battle with cancer. Their father, David, had never been particularly present, even when their mother was alive. He would disappear for days, gambling, mostly. After she died, it got worse, Abby explained, eyes distant with memory. He would leave us alone for weeks. The power got shut off. We ran out of food. We were just alone. What about relatives? Brian asked. No one took you in after your mother died? No, Abby murmured. Mom did not have any siblings and her parents died when she was young. Our dad's brothers and sisters said we would be a burden. Brian's chest tightened with each word. These 3 7-year-olds had endured more pain than most adults ever would. Mia picked nervously at her sleeve. People started noticing. Teachers, neighbors. We knew someone would call social services soon, and then they would split us up, Brian said quietly, connecting the dots. Yes, Abby's voice cracked. But before Mom died in the hospital, she made us promise. She held all our hands and said, you stay together no matter what. You are sisters. You protect each other. We promised her. We cannot break that promise. Mama said families do not give up on each other. Ivy spoke for the first time, her voice barely a whisper. Brian had to look away. He knew about promises made to the dying. He had made one himself on a hospital bed a year ago, holding his wife's hand while machines beeped around them. Take care of our boy Brian. Keep him safe. He tried, but safe was not enough when a drunk driver ran a red light on a Tuesday morning while Brian stayed home to fix a leaking pipe. So you ran, Brian said after composing himself. Abby nodded. We took a bus 3 hours away. We figured no one would recognize us here. We slept under benches at first, behind buildings, ate whatever we could find in dumpsters behind restaurants. Her voice was matter-of-fact, like she was describing a normal childhood experience rather than homelessness at age 7. Then there was a big storm one night. We were soaking wet, freezing. We saw this house. The back window was loose. We climbed in. It was dry and quiet. Empty. We thought maybe we could stay for a few days. That was 3 weeks ago, Brian said. Yes. Brian leaned back against the wall, studying the 3 small vases, watching him intently. Your father, you know where he is now? Abby's face hardened. Some casino, probably. He does not care where we are. He never did. Brian closed his eyes. This was insane. These were not his children. This was not his responsibility. He had come here to be alone, to figure out how to keep living when every breath felt like betraying the family he had lost. But when he opened his eyes, 3 small faces were staring at him with the kind of hope that was almost painful to see. Please, Abby whispered. Just let us stay tonight. It is supposed to rain. We will leave in the morning. We will not bother you again. Brian looked at them, really looked at their matted hair and dirty faces, at their thin arms and the fear in their eyes. At the way they held on to each other like letting go meant drowning. He thought about his son Tyler, who had been 7 when he died, who had loved building pillow forts and asking impossible questions about space, who had never gotten the chance to turn 8. "You can stay," Brian heard himself say. The relief that washed over Abby's face nearly broke him. "Tonight," he added quickly, "we will figure out tomorrow when it comes." But as Brian watched the girls curl up together under their thin blanket, exhaustion pulling them back towards sleep, he had a sinking feeling that tomorrow would not be nearly as simple as tonight. Brian spent that night in his truck parked in the driveway. He could not leave. What if something happened? What if they ran? What if they needed something? But he also could not stay inside. It felt too real, too permanent. He stared at the farmhouse through the windshield as rain started to patter against the roof. Inside those walls were 3 little girls who should be home with parents who loved them, should be safe and fed and tucked into warm beds. Instead, they were sleeping on a cold floor, clinging to each other because it was all they had. Brian pulled out his phone. He should call someone. Child services, the police, someone who knew how to handle this properly. His finger hovered over the screen. Then he thought about what Abby had said, the promise to their dying mother, the fear of being torn apart. He put the phone away. The next morning, Brian woke to sun streaming through the truck windows. His neck ached from sleeping, slumped in the driver's seat. He climbed out, stretching, and walked toward the farmhouse. Inside, the girls were awake, sitting together near the window, talking in hushed voices. They jumped when he entered. "Morning," Brian said. "Morning," Abby replied carefully, like she was waiting for him to tell them to leave. "You like eggs?" The girls blinked at him in confusion. "I am asking if you like scrambled eggs." "We like anything," Mia said softly. Brian almost smiled. "All right, let us see what I can do." The farmhouse kitchen was barely functional. Ancient stove, cracked counters, no running water yet. But Brian had bought some supplies from the convenience store on the way back last night. He managed to scramble eggs in a dented pan he had found in one of the cabinets. The girls ate in silence, sitting on the floor because there was no table, no chairs, just an empty house that Brian had planned to renovate someday. When they finished, Brian sat down across from them. "So here is the deal," he said. "I cannot just let you keep living here like this. You are 7 years old. You need school. You need to see a doctor. You need more than this." "We are not going to foster care," Ivy said with unexpected firmness. "I did not say foster care." "Then what are you saying?" Abby asked suspiciously. "Good question." Brian was not entirely sure himself. "I am saying we need to figure this out properly. Legally." "How?" "I do not know yet." Abby studied him with those sharp green eyes. "Why are you helping us?" "Because someone should," Brian said simply. It was not much of an answer, but it was the truth. That day, Brian went into town and bought supplies. Air mattresses, sleeping bags, pillows, basic toiletries, clothes that might actually fit. The girls watched with wide eyes as he carried everything inside. "You do not have to do this," Abby said quietly. "Yes, I do." "Why?" Brian did not answer. He was not sure he could put it into words. He just knew that walking away was not an option anymore. Over the next few days, a strange routine formed. Brian would drive into town each morning to get food. He would fix small things around the farmhouse. The leaking roof, the broken window, the busted front step. The girls stayed quiet, watching him like they were waiting for him to disappear. But he kept coming back. Slowly, carefully, they started to relax around him. One afternoon, Brian found Abby trying to cook something on the stove. She was standing on a chair, frowning at a pot of boiling water. "What are you making?" he asked. She jumped, startled. "Oh, pasta, I think." "You think?" "Mama used to make it. I'm trying to remember how much water she used." Brian stepped beside her. "Mind if I help?" Abby hesitated, then nodded. Together they figured it out. The pasta was a little overcooked, and the jar sauce was bland. But when all 4 of them sat on the floor and ate together, something settled in Brian's chest. It felt like dinner, like family, like something he thought had died a year ago. A week passed then, too. Brian found himself spending more time at the farmhouse. He told himself it was just to make sure the girls were okay, to fix things up, to figure out what to do. But the truth was that emptiness that had been suffocating him for a year felt a little lighter when he was here. The girls were starting to talk more. to smile, to act like kids instead of survivors. One evening, Mia found an old guitar in the attic covered in dust and cobwebs. She dragged it downstairs, her eyes bright. "Do you play?" she asked Brian. "Used to, long time ago. Will you play something?" Brian hesitated. He had not touched a guitar since before the accident. Music hurt too much. Reminded him of Allison, who used to sing to Tyler. Reminded him of Tyler, who would bang on toy drums off beat and laugh when Brian tried to teach him rhythm. But Mia was looking at him with such hope that he could not say no. He tuned the strings as best he could and played something simple, something soft. The notes filled the farmhouse, and for a moment Brian forgot about the pain. When he finished, all three girls were smiling. "That was really pretty," Ivy whispered. Brian's throat tightened. "Thanks, kid." 2 months in, Brian realized something had shifted. He was sleeping at the farmhouse now on an air mattress in what used to be the master bedroom. The girls had their own room down the hall, 3 sleeping bags lined up side by side because they refused to sleep apart. He had gotten the electricity turned on properly, fixed the plumbing, bought a table and chairs from a thrift store, started making the house livable. And the girls, they were laughing now, really laughing. Abby had started helping him with repairs, handing him tools and asking questions about everything. Mia played the guitar every night before bed, getting better with each attempt. Ivy drew pictures constantly, mostly of 4 people standing in front of a house holding hands. Brian kept every single one. One night he realized he had gone a full day without thinking about the accident, without being crushed by guilt, without feeling like he was betraying Allison and Tyler by still being alive. He was in the kitchen washing dishes when it hit him he had laughed today. Actually laughed at something silly, Abby said. At Mia's off-key singing, at Ivy's drawing of a horse that looked more like a blob with legs. He had not laughed in a year. But with these 3 little girls in his house, it was easier. The grief was still there. It would always be there, but it was not the only thing anymore. Brian knew what he was doing was illegal. He had essentially taken in 3 runaway children without contacting authorities. If anyone found out, he could face serious consequences. But every time he thought about calling social services, he remembered the fear in Abby's eyes, the way all 3 of them clung to each other, the promise they had made to their dying mother. He could not do that to them. The bond between them was growing deeper. It was gradual, slow building of trust that could not be rushed, but it was real. Abby started calling him Brian instead of Mr. Foster. Mia would sit beside him while he played guitar, trying to copy his finger positions. Ivy began leaving her drawings in places she knew he would find them on his pillow by the coffee maker tucked into his truck. And Brian started to care, really care about whether they were eating enough, about whether they were safe, about whether they were happy. He would wake in the night to check on them. He would worry when they were out of his sight. He would feel pride when Abby mastered a new recipe, or when Mia learned a new chord, or when Ivy overcame her shyness to tell him about her day. They had been living together nearly 3 months when Brian made his decision. The girls needed stability, security, a real home, not this strange limbo. One evening after dinner, he sat them down at their thrift store table. "I need to talk to you about something important," he said. The girls instantly tensed. Brian had learned that children who had been abandoned expected abandonment as the natural order of things. "We need to make this official," he continued. "Legal. You need to be enrolled in school, have regular medical checkups, social security numbers, birth certificates, all the things children are supposed to have." "Are you sending us away?" Abby asked, her voice small. "No, the opposite, actually." Brian took a deep breath. "I want to adopt you, all 3 of you, if that is something you would want." Silence fell over the kitchen. Complete, absolute silence. "You want to be our dad?" Mia finally asked. "Yes, I want to be your dad." "For real? Forever?" Ivy whispered, clutching her rabbit. "For real, forever." "But why?" Abby asked, suspicion still evident in her voice. "We are not your responsibility. We are not your family." Brian smiled gently. "Yes, you are. You have been my family since the day I found you sleeping in my farmhouse and decided I was not going to let anything bad happen to you ever again." Abby burst into tears. Then all 3 girls were crying and hugging him, and Brian was crying too. For the first time since the accident, he felt like he had a future. The next day, Brian contacted Sarah Chen, a lawyer in the city who specialized in family law. The phone conversation was long and complicated. Sarah explained that the situation was not simple. The girl's father would need to be located. His parental rights would need to be legally addressed. There would be investigations, home visits, background checks. And if I wanted to adopt them? Brian asked. Sarah was quiet for a moment. That is a lengthy process, Brian. Could take a year or more, and there is no guarantee. But it is possible. Then let us start. He hired her that day. Together they began the search for David Wilson. It took weeks, but they finally located him at a motel 2 towns away. Brian drove there alone, unsure what to expect, but knowing this confrontation was necessary. David Wilson was a shell of a man, thin, unshaven, eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep or too much alcohol or both. When Brian explained who he was, David barely reacted. So they ran away, he said flatly. Figured as much. Do you want to know if they are okay? Brian asked, unable to keep the edge from his voice. David shrugged. They always were survivors. Like cockroaches, those three. Brian clenched his fists, fighting the urge to strike the man. I want to adopt them. That got David's attention. His eyes narrowed. What is in it for me? Nothing, except knowing your daughters are safe and cared for. David laughed a harsh sound without humor. You think I care about that? Those kids were nothing but trouble from the moment they were born. Rachel wanted them. I never did. Then sign away your rights, Brian said, pushing the papers Sarah had prepared across the table. Let them have a chance at a real life. David studied the papers, then looked up at Brian. There must be money in this for you. Foster care payments or something. There is no money, Brian said, his voice tight. Just 3 little girls who deserve better than what you gave them. Something flickered across David's face. Shame, perhaps. It was gone as quickly as it appeared. He grabbed the pen and signed without reading a single word. They are your problem now, he said, sliding the papers back. Good luck. You will need it. Brian left feeling both relieved and disturbed. He could not comprehend how anyone could discard their own children so easily. But at least this hurdle was cleared. The road ahead would still be long and difficult, but the first step was taken. When he returned home, the girls were waiting anxiously. They had known where he was going, though he had tried to shield them from the details. Is he coming for us? Abby asked, her voice trembling slightly. Brian crouched down to their level. No, sweetheart, he is not coming for you, Boom. He signed papers saying I can start the process to become your legal guardian. So we can stay? Mia asked. You can stay. Forever? Ivy whispered. Brian nodded. Forever. That night, as he tucked them into their sleeping bags, Abby grabbed his hand. Are we going to be Fosters now? Like your name? Brian smiled. The symbolism had not escaped him. Yes, Abby Foster, Mia Foster, Ivy Foster. How does that sound? It sounds like home, Abby said. And for the first time in too long, it felt like home to Brian, too. The farmhouse began to transform. What started as emergency repairs evolved into full renovation. Brian tackled each project methodically, as if rebuilding the house might rebuild something inside himself. New wiring replaced frayed hazards. Fresh pipes brought running water to long, dry faucets. Each nail driven, each wall painted marked another day they remained together. The October air grew crisp, but inside warmth began to fill more than just the rooms. Brian sold his condo in the city, using the money to fund renovations. His savings dwindled faster than anticipated. Raising 3 children cost more than he had imagined, but watching them flourish beneath his care brought rewards money could never purchase. Jessica Parker from Child Protective Services arrived unannounced one Tuesday afternoon. The girls froze at the sight of her official badge. Brian felt his heart pound as he invited her inside. How did you find out? He asked while the girls huddled together in the kitchen. Jessica reviewed her notes. Anonymous call from someone concerned about 3 children suddenly appearing at a property with a single man. Standard procedure requires investigation. Brian nodded, understanding this suspicion. A single man with 3 young girls raised questions. Questions he would need to answer. The initial interview lasted 3 hours. Jessica interviewed each child separately despite their protests at being divided. She examined the house, scrutinizing sleeping arrangements, food supplies, educational provisions. Her expression revealed little, but Brian recognized the judgment in her gaze. "You should have reported finding them immediately," she said when they finally sat alone at the kitchen table. "What you have done constitutes kidnapping under the law, regardless of intentions." "They would have been separated," Brian said quietly. "I could not do that to them." Jessica studied him, her professional demeanor softening slightly. "These girls have clearly bonded with you. I can see they feel safe here. But this situation cannot continue informally. There are procedures, requirements." "What happens now?" "We have two options," Jessica explained. "I report this as a potential criminal matter, or we move you into the system properly. Temporary guardianship while pursuing permanent adoption if that remains your intention." Brian met her gaze directly. "I want to adopt them. All three." Jessica nodded, making notes. "You understand the scrutiny you will face? Your history, financial situation, mental health, everything will be examined. The process is invasive by necessity." "I understand. Including your past treatment for depression following your family's accident?" Brian tensed. She had done her research thoroughly. "Yes, including that." Jessica closed her folder. "I should remove these children today, under normal protocol." The statement hung in the air like a physical threat. Brian felt his chest constrict. "But," she continued carefully, "removing them now would cause unnecessary trauma. I will recommend temporary guardianship while we begin the formal process. You have 90 days to meet all requirements or they will be placed elsewhere. Is that understood?" Relief flooded through Brian. "Completely. Thank you." After Jessica left, the girls emerged from their hiding spot upstairs, eyes wide with unasked questions. "Is she taking us away?" Abby asked, voice barely audible. Brian crouched to their level. "No, but we need to make things official. She is going to help us become a real family legally." "Promise?" Mia whispered. Brian nodded, though uncertainty gnawed at him. The path ahead would be challenging. "I promise to try my absolute hardest. That is all anyone can do." The 90-day evaluation period brought rigorous requirements. Brian enrolled the girls in homeschooling with Nancy Rivera, who visited twice weekly. The girls flourished under her gentle guidance, especially Abby, who displayed remarkable aptitude for mathematics. They began seeing to Marshall for medical checkups, addressing years of neglected healthcare. Brian confronted his dwindling finances with growing concern. His savings had sustained them, but could not last indefinitely. One evening after the girls had gone to bed, he calculated their remaining funds. 6 months at current spending before serious trouble. He needed income, sustainable income that allowed him to remain present for the girls. His former engineering firm called unexpectedly the following week. Martin Sheffield, his old boss, sounded pleased to hear from him. "We have been following your progress through Sarah," Martin said. "The company misses your expertise, Brian. We want you back." Hope surged through Brian. "I cannot relocate, Martin, not now. We understand your situation, but the Jefferson project needs your specific expertise. 6 months on site minimum. Significant salary increase plus housing allowance. Consider it, Brian. This solves your financial concerns." The offer tempted him. Financial security, return to work he excelled at, a path back to normalcy. But it would mean leaving the farmhouse, leaving the girls during this crucial period, moving them yet again when stability was what they needed most. "I cannot, Martin. The girls need consistency right now." "Think about their future, Brian. Children need financial security too." The comment lingered after they hung up. Brian stood in the doorway of the girls' room watching them sleep. Abby in the middle, as always, protective even in slumber. His heart swelled looking at them. These children who had survived abandonment and homelessness, who had claimed space in his broken heart and begun healing it from within. Would a good father choose stability over opportunity? Security over mobility? The farmhouse over career advancement? Brian already knew his answer. He had made one promise he failed to keep to Tyler. He would not fail these girls. The next morning brought a solution. Brian called his former colleagues, directly bypassing management. Within days, he had arranged freelance consulting work he could complete remotely. The income would be less than the firm's offer, but sufficient. Most importantly, it allowed him to remain at the farmhouse with the girls. Brian converted the small bedroom downstairs into an office, setting up drafting equipment and computer stations. The girls watched curiously as he established his workspace. "What do you do?" Mia asked, watching him calibrate the computer. "I design buildings," Brian explained. "I tell construction teams how to build things safely." "Like our house?" Ivy asked, looking around at the improvements. "Much bigger usually. Bridges, office buildings, hospitals." Abby studied the blueprints with particular interest. "Will you teach me?" Brian smiled. "If you want to learn, absolutely." 2 months into the evaluation period, Jessica returned for another inspection. She noted improvements with approval. The house now had functioning bathrooms, proper heating, individual beds, though the girls still pushed them together each night. Nancy provided positive educational assessments. The kitchen contained healthy food. All positive markers. "Your financial situation concerns me," Jessica said, reviewing his records. "The consulting work is promising but inconsistent. Adoption requires demonstrating long-term stability." "I have offers for permanent positions," Brian explained, "but they require relocation or extensive travel. Neither serves the girls' best interests right now." Jessica studied him thoughtfully. Most applicants would prioritize securing employment to impress the evaluation committee. "I am not trying to impress anyone. I am trying to be a good father." The word surprised even Brian. Father. The title felt both foreign and right simultaneously. Jessica made notes, nodding slightly. The community engagement remains minimal. Children need social connections beyond the home. Brian acknowledged this weakness. Their isolation initially provided safety, but now limited development. The girls needed friends' experiences beyond the farmhouse, connections to the larger world. That Sunday, Brian drove the girls to the local church. They sat in the back row wearing their nicest clothes, freshly washed hair tied neatly with ribbons. Pastor Tom Martin greeted them warmly after the service. "New faces are always welcome," he said, crouching to the girls' level. "What are your names, young ladies?" The girls introduced themselves hesitantly. Brian explained their situation in general terms. The pastor listened without judgment. "Foster means to nurture growth," Pastor Tom said thoughtfully. "Seems the name suits your family perfectly." Family. Another word that felt both strange and natural. "We have Sunday school classes the girls might enjoy, and a community potluck next weekend. Please come, all of you." The invitation proved transformative. At the potluck, the girls met other children for the first time since their arrival. Initially shy, they gradually engaged, participating in games and activities. Brian connected with other adults, sharing his renovation challenges, receiving advice and offers of assistance. Helen Schmidt, the 70-year-old widow from the neighboring farm, approached Brian as he watched the girls play. "Been wondering about the lights in that old place," she said directly. "Thought vandals at first, then saw little ones running about. Figured there was a story." Brian tensed, wondering if Helen had been the anonymous caller. "They are good girls," he said carefully. Helen nodded, watching Ivy laugh as she played tag. "Children belong in homes, not institutions. My Harold always said that. We fostered 17 over the years before he passed." Brian looked at her with new appreciation. 17? Each one needed something different. Love mostly. Structure sometimes. Patience always. Helen met his gaze directly. "You need help with those three, you call me. I remember what raising children requires." The offer of support from an unexpected source lifted an invisible weight Brian had been carrying alone. Community began to form around them. Nancy connected them with other homeschooling families. Pastor Tom introduced Brian to men with construction skills, willing to help with remaining renovations. Helen brought over casseroles and offered gardening lessons to the girls. With each passing week, Brian noticed changes in the girls. Abby relaxed her vigilance slightly, trusting others might help protect her sisters. Mia gained confidence, performing songs on the guidon for small gatherings. Ivy spoke more frequently, even to strangers, expressing thoughts through words, not just drawings. They were healing, all four of them together. The final month of evaluation approached rapidly, bringing renewed anxiety. Sarah Chen visited the farmhouse to prepare Brian for the upcoming hearing. "The judge will consider multiple factors," she explained, reviewing documentation. "Your financial situation, home environment, psychological evaluation, the girl's adjustment and preferences. David Wilson's termination of parental rights helps substantially, but adoption remains challenging for single fathers." Brian nodded, absorbing the information. "What are our chances?" Sarah considered carefully. Normally, I would say limited. Single man adopting three girls simultaneously raises concerns automatically. But your case has unusual strengths. The girls' clear attachment to you, their refusal to be separated, your willingness to sacrifice career advancement for their well-being. Jessica Parker's recommendation carries significant weight, and she appears supportive. So we have a chance? More than a chance. But prepare for intensive questioning, Brian. The judge will challenge your motives, your capability, your understanding of what raising three girls entails. The hearing date loomed, creating tension throughout the household. Brian prepared documentation obsessively, ensuring every requirement was satisfied. The girls sensed his anxiety, responding with their own. Abby became overly helpful. Mia practiced guitar, constantly seeking perfection. Ivy retreated into silence, drawing pictures of courtrooms and judges with stern faces. One evening, Brian overheard whispers from the girls' bedroom. Peering through the cracked door, he witnessed Abby organizing small backpacks. "If they say no, we run," she instructed her sisters. "Pack only what matters most. We stay together no matter what." "But Brian promised," Mia protested. "Adults break promises," Abby replied with aged wisdom. "We need a backup plan." Brian's heart shattered hearing those words. Despite months of care, the girls still prepared for abandonment, still expected disappointment. Brian knocked gently on the door before entering. The girls froze guiltily. "We were just," Abby began. Brian sat on the edge of the bed. "I know what you were doing, and I understand why." The girls exchanged nervous glances. "I need you to hear something important." Brian continued, voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. "No matter what any judge or social worker or anyone decides, we are family now. You three and me. Papers do not make a family. Love does. And I love you. All of you." "But what if they say no?" Ivy asked, clutching her rabbit. "Then we keep fighting. We appeal. We try again. I will never stop trying." Brian looked each girl in the eyes. "I will never stop fighting for you. Ever." Abby studied him, searching for deception, finding none. "You promise? For real?" "For real. Families do not give up on each other, remember?" The backpacks were quietly unpacked. A small victory against the fear that had governed their young lives for too long. The week before the hearing, Brian received unexpected news from Sarah. The judge wanted to interview the girls privately before making any decision. Brian explained this to them as gently as possible. "The judge needs to hear from you what you want," he said as they sat together at the kitchen table. "You need to be honest about your feelings, about staying here, about me." "What if we say something wrong?" Mia asked worriedly. "There are no wrong answers when telling the truth," Brian assured them. "Just speak from your heart." The morning of the hearing arrived cold and clear. Brian dressed the girls in new outfits purchased specially for the occasion. Abby wore a blue dress with matching headband. Mia selected a yellow sweater and neat skirt. Ivy chose a green jumper that matched her eyes. Brian wore his only suit, freshly pressed the night before. The courthouse loomed imposing and official. The girls gripped Brian's hands tightly as they climbed the granite steps. Inside, Sarah waited with reassuring smiles and final instructions. Jessica Parker nodded professionally from across the hallway. Helen Schmidt arrived unexpectedly, wearing her Sunday best, promising to give that judge a piece of my mind if needed. Judge Eleanor Montgomery conducted the proceedings with formal efficiency. She reviewed documentation, questioned Jessica regarding her evaluations, interrogated Brian about his motivations, finances, and long-term plans. Her expression revealed nothing as Brian answered each question truthfully. "Mr. Foster, while your intentions appear admirable, this case presents unusual challenges," Judge Montgomery stated. "Adopting three children simultaneously as a single father requires extraordinary commitment. Are you certain you understand what you are undertaking?" "Your Honor, these girls saved my life," Brian replied simply. "A year ago, I had no purpose, no reason to continue. They gave me that. I understand the responsibility. I welcome it." Judge Montgomery nodded thoughtfully. "I will interview the children now, alone." The 40 minutes Brian spent waiting outside the chamber were the longest of his life. He paced relentlessly, ignoring Sarah's attempts at reassurance. When the bailiff finally called them back inside, Brian searched the girls' expressions for clues, finding only nervous anticipation. Judge Montgomery studied her notes before addressing the court. "This case presents unique circumstances requiring careful consideration. The standard preference for two-parent households must be balanced against the clearly expressed wishes of the children, their exceptional bond as triplets, and their established relationship with the petitioner. Brian held his breath. Having reviewed all evidence, conducted interviews, and considered recommendations, I find sufficient cause to grant the petition for adoption. Brian Foster is hereby recognized as the legal father of Abby, Mia, and Ivy, who shall henceforth bear the surname Foster. The formal language barely registered as Brian absorbed the essential truth. They had won. The girls were his daughters, legally, officially, forever. The girls looked to him for confirmation, not fully understanding the legal terminology. Brian nodded, tears filling his eyes. Three small bodies crashed into him simultaneously, arms wrapping around his waist, faces pressed against his chest. Brian enveloped them in his embrace as applause erupted through the courtroom. "We are really yours now," Abby whispered. "You were always mine," Brian said, voice breaking. "This just makes it official." They returned home to the farmhouse, now truly their home. Brian ordered pizza. They attempted to bake a cake from a box mix that emerged lopsided and imperfectly frosted. They ate it anyway, declaring it the best cake ever made. They danced in the living room to music from the old radio. They laughed until their sides hurt. That night, as Brian tucked them into bed, Abby grabbed his hand. "Thank you," she said, "for not calling the police that first day, for giving us a chance, for everything." Brian squeezed her hand. "Thank you for saving me." "We saved you?" Mia asked, surprised. "Yes, you did. I was lost before I found you. You gave me a reason to keep going." Abby hugged him tightly. "I am glad we broke into your farmhouse." Brian laughed. "Yeah, me too." The formal adoption party organized by the church community took place the following weekend. The farmhouse yard filled with people from town, many of whom had contributed to renovations or provided support during the process. Pastor Tom blessed the new family formally. Nancy brought books for each girl matched to their specific interests. Helen Schmidt presented a handmade quilt embroidered with their names. The celebration reached its peak when Pastor Tom called for everyone's attention. "Today we celebrate not just a legal proceeding, but the formation of a family," he announced. "God brings people together in mysterious ways, sometimes through storm and struggle, sometimes through chance encounters in abandoned farmhouses." Gentle laughter rippled through the gathering. The Foster family may have taken an unconventional path, but their bond demonstrates the true meaning of family. Love freely given, commitment in the face of challenges, faith in each other when the future seemed uncertain. Brian stood with an arm around each girl, feeling a completeness he had thought forever lost. As guests mingled, enjoying food and conversation, Brian noticed a woman he had not seen before. She stood near the dessert table, arranging cupcakes with artistic precision. Dark hair swept into a simple knot, warm smile as she chatted with Helen. Something about her drew his attention, though he could not have explained why. Helen beckoned Brian over. "Brian Foster, meet Kate Miller. Just moved here from Denver to open the bakery in town. Brought these magnificent cupcakes." Kate extended her hand. "Congratulations on your adoption." "Helen has told me the story. It is truly inspirational." "Thank you," Brian replied, suddenly aware of his casual attire and the frosting Ivy had smeared on his sleeve earlier. "The cupcakes look amazing." "The red velvet ones have cream cheese frosting," Kate said. "My specialty." Their conversation was interrupted as Mia rushed over, grabbing Brian's hand. "Dad, come quick! Pastor Tom is going to let me play guitar for everyone." The word "dad" still sounded new. Wonderful. Brian excused himself, following Mia to where she had set up with her guitar. He glanced back once to see Kate watching with a gentle smile. The next morning, Brian took the girls to town for supplies. The new bakery, Fresh Start, had just opened its doors that week. The girls pressed their faces against the glass display, admiring elaborately decorated cookies and pastries. "Can we go in?" Abby asked. "Please?" Brian hesitated, remembering Kate from the party. Something about her had stirred feelings long dormant, feelings he was not sure he was ready to explore. "Just for a quick treat," he agreed. The bell chimed softly as they entered. The shop smelled of vanilla, cinnamon, and freshly baked bread. Kate looked up from behind the counter, her face brightening with recognition. "The Foster family, welcome to Fresh Start." "Your shop is pretty," Ivy said with unusual boldness. Thank you, sweetheart. Kate came around the counter crouching to the girl's level. First-time customers get to choose a special cookie on the house. Shop policy. The girls looked to Brian for permission, eyes wide with excitement. He nodded, smiling at their enthusiasm. While the girls deliberated over their selections, Kate moved to stand beside Brian. Coffee? Bold choice for the bold. Brian laughed, remembering his order from the party. If it is not an imposition. Never. Kate poured a cup, sliding it across the counter. How does it feel, being a father officially? Brian considered the question, watching his daughters pointing excitedly at different treats. Terrifying, exhilarating. Right. Kate nodded, understanding. The best things usually are all three simultaneously. Their conversation flowed with surprising ease. Kate asked thoughtful questions about the girls, their interests, their adjustment. She shared stories of her own journey opening the bakery after years in corporate catering. Fresh start for fresh start, she explained. Sometimes life takes unexpected turns. Brian understood that sentiment completely. As they prepared to leave, Kate handed Brian a small box. Cinnamon rolls for tomorrow's breakfast. A housewarming gift, though. I suppose you have been warming the house for months now. Thank you. That is incredibly kind. Kate smiled, that warm, genuine smile that reached her eyes. Kindness matters. I learned that the hard way. Now I practice it daily like any important skill. Brian found himself returning to the bakery frequently in the weeks that followed, always with reasonable excuses. Breakfast pastries for the girls, bread for lunches, coffee for himself. Kate always greeted them warmly, remembering details from previous conversations, asking about Abby's progress with math, Mia's newest song, Ivy's latest artwork. The girls noticed his interest before Brian himself acknowledged it. You smile different at the bakery, lady, Ivy observed one afternoon as they drove home. Different how? Brian asked, surprised. Bigger, Mia explained, and your eyes get crinkly. You talk more too, Abby added analytically. Usually you just say please and thank you at stores. With her, you tell stories and laugh. Brian felt warmth creep up his neck. Ms. Miller is easy to talk to. The girls exchanged knowing glances that seemed beyond their years. Mom would like her, Abby said quietly after a moment. She always said kindness was the most important thing in people. The comment caught Brian off guard. The girls rarely mentioned their mother, finding the memory still painful. That Abby would connect Kate to Rachel felt significant somehow. Your mother sounds very wise, Brian replied carefully. She was. Abby looked out the window thoughtfully. She also said people deserve second chances at happiness. Brian glanced in the rearview mirror, meeting Abby's eyes briefly. Sometimes he forgot these children had experienced more life in 7 years than many adults, had gained wisdom through hardship most would never know. Everyone deserves happiness, he agreed. Their lives settled into comfortable patterns as autumn faded into early winter. Brian's consulting business grew, allowing financial stability without sacrificing time with the girls. The homeschooling arrangement with Nancy continued, though they discussed transitioning to regular school the following year. The farmhouse transformation continued, with community help restoring the historic property to its former charm. One evening, as snow fell gently outside, Brian sat in the living room reviewing architectural plans. The girls had gone to bed earlier, tired from a day of sledding on the hill behind the house. A soft knock at the front door surprised him. Kate stood on the porch, snowflakes melting in her dark hair, a covered dish in her hands. I hope I am not intruding, she said. Helen mentioned you all had been sledding all them, thought you might appreciate a hot meal. Brian invited her inside, touched by the thoughtfulness. The girls are already asleep, but I would welcome the company if you would like to stay. Kate agreed, remaining for dinner, sharing comfortable conversation. As she prepared to leave, she paused at the door. Brian, I have been wanting to ask something, but was not sure if it would be appropriate. Brian felt a flutter of anticipation. Please ask. Would you and the girls like to help me decorate the bakery for Christmas this weekend? I have trees and lights, but could use extra hands, and honest opinions from 3 artistic young ladies. The invitation was perfectly innocent, yet felt significant. A step forward beyond casual encounters at the bakery counter. Including the girls showed respect for their place in Brian's life. We would love to, Brian replied. The girls will be thrilled. Kate smiled, that warm, genuine smile. Wonderful. Saturday then. After she left, Brian stood in the doorway watching snowflakes dance in the porch light. For the first time in years, he felt the stirring of possibility. Not just survival, but life with all its complexity, beauty, and potential. Brian Foster had bought an abandoned farmhouse seeking escape from pain. Instead, he found three little girls who needed him as much as he needed them. Together, they had built more than a home. They had built a family, and perhaps that family still had room to grow in ways none of them had anticipated. The Christmas season transformed the farmhouse through layers of meaning rather than mere decoration. For Brian, each ornament hung from the towering pine harvested from their back acres carried dual significance. The girls approached decorating with fierce determination, insisting every room receive attention, even closets, even bathrooms. Standing in the kitchen doorway, Brian watched Ivy meticulously arrange pine boughs along the windowsill, her artistic eye evident in each precise adjustment. "Tyler used to do that," Brian said quietly, the words escaping before he considered them. Three heads turned toward him. He rarely mentioned his son, finding the territory still treacherous to navigate even after these months together. He would rearrange the decorations when no one was looking, Brian continued, surprised by how the memory warmed rather than wounded. Move things half an inch, said it had to be exactly right. Ivy studied him with solemn eyes. Was he like me? Brian considered this carefully. In some ways, he noticed details others missed, saw possibilities in ordinary things. "Do you get sad when you think about him?" Mia asked, characteristic directness cutting to the heart. "Yes," Brian answered honestly, "but now sometimes the memories bring other feelings too, like gratitude that I had him in my life at all." Abby absorbed this with the thoughtful expression that made her seem decades older than 8. "Is that how it will be for us someday, when we think about Mom?" Brian crossed to her, crouching to meet her eyes. "I believe so. Grief changes shape over time. It doesn't vanish, but it makes room for other things beside itself." The conversation shifted something between them. Permission granted to acknowledge all their losses without fear of collapse. They began tentatively sharing memories of Rachel, at first hesitantly, then with increasing comfort. Brian encouraged this, understanding that remembering her mother did not threaten his place in their lives, but helped integrate their past with present. The girls' participation in decorating Kate's bakery began innocently enough. A Saturday morning in December found them arranging display window decorations while Brian helped repair a stubborn refrigerator. Kate welcomed their energy, incorporating their suggestions with sincere consideration. She never spoke down to them, never dismissed their ideas as merely cute. She treated them as valuable contributors, equals in the creative process. Brian observed these interactions with growing appreciation. Kate possessed a natural warmth that drew people to her, yet maintained an understated strength beneath her gentle exterior. She had left a successful career, built a business alone, created something meaningful in this small town. Her kindness extended beyond politeness into genuine concern for others. The Saturday before Christmas, Kate closed the bakery early to help the Fosters finalize their holiday preparations. The kitchen filled with laughter as flour dusted every surface. Brian watched from the doorway, content to observe the comfortable dynamic that had formed. This contentment unsettled him slightly. He had not sought this developing connection with Kate, had actively avoided romantic entanglements since Allison's death. Later, as Kate prepared to leave, she handed Brian a small wrapped package. "A little something for under the tree," she explained. "For all of you." Their fingers brushed during the exchange, lingering perhaps a moment longer than necessary. The connection sent warmth through Brian's chest, unfamiliar, yet welcome. "Will you join us for Christmas dinner?" he asked impulsively. "Helen is coming. Nancy and her husband, too." Kate hesitated, something uncertain flickering across her expression. "Are you sure? I wouldn't want to intrude on family time." "You wouldn't be, Prime," Brian assured her, then realized the implied meaning of his words only after speaking them. Kate's expression softened. "Then I would like that very much." Christmas Day brought fresh snow blanketing the farmhouse in pristine white. The girls woke at dawn, racing downstairs with unbridled excitement. Their joy at each small gift touched Brian deeply. These children, who had once survived on discarded scraps, now expressed gratitude for every package, regardless of size or cost. Kate arrived midday bearing additional desserts, though Brian had insisted she bring only herself. When they opened her gift, a handcrafted photo album already containing pictures of their first months together, tears glistened in Brian's eyes. For memories past and future, Kate had written on the inside cover. The day progressed through meals, games, conversation until evening approached and guests departed, leaving the Fosters and Kate seated before the fireplace. The girls curled together on the rug half asleep. Brian and Kate sat on the sofa, comfortable silence between them. "Thank you for including me today," Kate said quietly. "The holidays can be difficult alone." Brian nodded, understanding completely. "Is your family far away?" "In different ways." Kate gazed into the fire. "My parents passed years ago. My sister lives overseas. Distance happens in relationships sometimes without intention." "I know something about that." "The girls told me about your son and wife," Kate said carefully. "I hope that wasn't overstepping." "No." Brian found he meant it. "Allison and Tyler are part of who I am, part of our story." Kate's hand found his in the firelight, a simple touch conveying understanding beyond words. Brian curled his fingers around hers, feeling something long dormant awakening within him, not replacing what was lost, but growing alongside it. Winter deepened, bringing snow days, pond skating, evenings by the fire. Kate became a regular presence in their lives, joining weekend outings, sharing Sunday dinners, offering a feminine perspective Brian sometimes felt the girls needed. Her bakery thrived, becoming a community gathering spot where the Foster girls were welcomed as honorary staff. The developing relationship between Brian and Kate did not progress without complications. Ivy began having nightmares again, waking screaming for her mother. Abby grew suspiciously attentive to Kate's interactions with Brian, watching every exchange with narrowed eyes. Only Mia seemed unreservedly enthusiastic about Kate's increasing presence. One evening after Kate departed following dinner, Brian found Abby sitting alone at the kitchen table, notebook open before her. "Everything okay?" he asked, taking the seat beside her. Abby hesitated before speaking. "Are you going to marry her?" The directness startled Brian. "That's not something we've discussed." "But you might someday." "It's possible," Brian answered carefully. "Would that bother you?" Abby studied her notebook, avoiding his eyes. "Mom made us promise to stay together, but she didn't say anything about adding more people." Brian considered his response thoughtfully. "Your mother wanted you to have family, to be loved and safe. What if Kate doesn't want us? Just you?" The vulnerability behind the question broke Brian's heart. "That would never happen," Brian assured her. "Any relationship in my life includes you three. That's non-negotiable." Abby finally met his eyes. "What if she tries to make us forget Mom?" "No one could ever replace your mother," Brian said firmly. "Kate understands that. She's not trying to be your mother. She's just being Kate." The conversation revealed the complexity beneath the surface. The girls' acceptance of Kate wasn't universal or uncomplicated. Each processed her presence differently, brought unique fears and hopes to the evolving family dynamic. Brian discussed these concerns with Kate during a rare moment alone while the girls built snow forts outside. "They're testing boundaries," Kate observed, watching through the window, "making sure their foundation remains secure despite changes." "Ivy's nightmares have returned," Brian confided, "and Abby's been interrogating me about our relationship." "What did you tell her?" "The truth, that nothing changes my commitment to them." Kate nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps we should slow down, give them more time to adjust." "Is that what you want?" Brian asked carefully. "What I want is for all of you to be happy," Kate replied, "even if that means taking steps backward temporarily." The honesty in her response confirmed what Brian already sensed about her character. Kate truly considered the girls' well-being paramount, not merely extensions of her interest in him. Valentine's Day arrived with swirling snow and bitter cold. Despite Kate's suggestion they slow down, Brian arranged for Helen to watch the girls, allowing him to invite Kate to dinner at the only restaurant in town. The evening marked their first official date without the children present. Over candlelight, they shared stories from before they met. Kate spoke of her culinary training, her marriage that ended amicably but painfully, her decision to leave corporate success for small-town authenticity. Brian described his engineering career, meeting Allison in college, the joy and devastation of fatherhood. "I never expected to feel this way again," Brian admitted as they finished dessert. "After losing them, I thought that part of me was gone forever." Kate reached across the table, taking his hand. The heart's capacity for love is not limited. It expands. When Brian returned home, he found Abby awake, sitting in the darkened living room. "You're supposed to be asleep," he said, hanging his coat. "Did you have a good time?" she asked, ignoring his comment. Brian sat beside her and, "Yes, but I missed you three." "We're fine without you sometimes," Abby said with forced casualness. "Like we were before." Brian recognized the deliberate barb, understood the fear behind it. "That may be true, but I'm never fine without you three anymore." Abby leaned against him slightly. "Ivy cried tonight, said she's scared you'll leave like Dad did." The comparison stung. "I would never." "I told her that," Abby said. "But sometimes knowing something here," she tapped her head, "doesn't make it feel real here." She pressed a hand against her chest. "What would help make it feel real?" Brian asked. Abby considered this seriously. "Time, maybe. Proof. I don't know." The conversation highlighted the fragility beneath their progress. Months of building trust could not completely erase years of abandonment and loss. Brian realized that integrating Kate into their lives would require more patience, more intentional reassurance than he had anticipated. Spring arrived gradually, winter releasing its grip reluctantly. The farm awakened with new life, birds returning to nest in ancient trees, wildflowers emerging from thawing ground. Kate helped the girls plant a vegetable garden, teaching them to nurture seedlings into productive plants. One warm April evening, Brian sat with Kate on the porch, watching the girls chase fireflies across the yard. Their laughter carried through twilight unfettered, joyful. "They are flourishing," Kate observed. "Sometimes I forget what they survived before finding you." Brian nodded. "They still have moments, nightmares. Abby checking food supplies compulsively. Mia needing reassurance we won't disappear. But those moments come less frequently now." "Speaking of progress," Brian began carefully, "Nancy suggested enrolling them in regular school next year. They've progressed beyond her curriculum and need broader social experiences." Kate considered thoughtfully. "How do they feel about that prospect?" "Mixed emotions, excited but nervous. They've never attended school together, only separately before their mother died. Abby worries about being separated into different classrooms. Perhaps discuss with the principal keeping them together initially at least," Kate suggested. "Transitions should honor their bond while encouraging independence." Brian appreciated her balanced perspective. Kate never presumed authority over the girls, but offered insights without hesitation when asked. She had found the delicate balance between involvement and respect for his role as their father. The prospect of school introduced new anxieties into their household. Ivy began withdrawing again, her artwork turning darker, populated by looming shadowy figures. Mia voiced concerns about whether other children would understand their unusual family situation. Abby researched school policies with characteristic intensity, attempting to prepare for every possible challenge. "What if kids make fun of us for not having a real mom?" Mia asked one evening during dinner. Kate flinched slightly, though she tried to hide it. "You had a real mom," Brian corrected gently. "She'll always be your mother. Nothing changes that." "But she's not here," Mia persisted, "and kids can be mean about things like that." "Then those kids don't deserve your friendship," Brian replied. "It might help to practice responding," Kate suggested. "Think about what you might say if someone asks difficult questions." The conversation evolved into role-playing various scenarios, Kate offering insights from her own childhood experiences with insensitive classmates. The exercise proved surprisingly effective, giving the girls concrete strategies while acknowledging their concerns as legitimate. As summer approached, Brian received worrying news. The school principal called, explaining that district policy prevented placing triplets in the same classroom. "It's counterproductive to their individual development," Principal Williams explained over the phone. "We can place two together at most, but the third would need a different classroom." Brian anticipated the girls' reaction when he shared this information. Abby immediately began researching alternative schools. Mia burst into tears. Ivy retreated into silence, refusing to discuss the matter at all. "This feels like breaking our promise to Mom," Abby said angrily. "We're supposed to stay together, always." "Being in different classrooms for part of the day doesn't change your bond," Brian reasoned. "You'll still have lunch together, recess before and after school." "You don't understand," Abby insisted. "We protect each other, How can we do that if we're separated? Kate suggested a meeting with the principal to discuss accommodations. The girls prepared detailed arguments explaining why their situation warranted exception. Principal Williams listened with surprising receptivity to three determined 8-year-olds. She couldn't override district policy completely, but offered a compromise. The girls would have different homeroom teachers, but share most special classes and lunch periods. They could also request schedule adjustments if separation proved genuinely distressing. This is a beginning, Kate noted as they left the meeting. Sometimes advocacy means accepting partial victories while continuing to work toward better solutions. The summer brought both challenges and joys. Brian's freelance business expanded, requiring more of his attention. The girls participated in community activities for the first time: art classes for Ivy, music camp for Mia, surprisingly a junior engineering program for Abby, who had developed fascination with Brian's work. Kate juggled bakery responsibilities with increasing time at the farmhouse. Their relationship progressed naturally through these months. Kate spent increasingly more time at the farmhouse, eventually keeping extra clothes, toiletries in the spare room. When Brian tentatively broached the subject of making their arrangement more permanent, Abby surprised him with her response. "We've been wondering when you would ask her to live here officially," she said with characteristic directness. "You both keep pretending she's just visiting, but everyone knows that's not true." Brian struggled to maintain composure. "Would that arrangement bother you or your sisters?" "We voted," Abby replied seriously. 2 yes, 1 undecided. Undecided? Ivy wants to know if Kate would help redesign her bedroom before committing. The pragmatic negotiation made Brian laugh. From crisis to practical considerations, perhaps they had come further than he realized. The following weekend, Brian took Kate for a walk through the orchard trees heavy with ripening fruit. They stopped beneath the largest apple tree, its branches creating a cathedral of dappled sunlight. Brian had practiced words, rehearsed speeches, but standing there, everything prepared, evaporated. "I love you," he said simply. "The girls love you in their various complicated ways. We want you in our lives permanently if that's something you want too." Kate's eyes filled with tears. "Are you proposing Brian Foster?" "Inelegantly, but sincerely, yes." "Then my answer is yes. Inelegantly, but sincerely." They sealed the commitment with a kiss witnessed only by ancient trees and distant birdsong. When they returned to the house hand in hand, the girls were waiting on the porch with Helen, who wore a suspiciously knowing smile. Abby stepped forward first. "Did you ask her?" she demanded without preamble. Brian nodded, unable to suppress his smile. "I did." "And?" Kate held up her hand, though no ring adorned it yet. "I said yes." Two small bodies launched themselves forward. Mia wrapped her arms around Kate's waist. Abby hugged Brian tightly. Only Ivy remained on the porch steps, watching with cautious eyes. Kate approached her, slowly crouching to eye level. "I understand this is a big change, Ivy. It's okay if you need time." Ivy studied Kate's face with solemn intensity. "If you live here, will you help me paint my room? I want a mural, with trees like the ones where Dad proposed." Kate smiled gently. "I would be honored to help, but I might not be very good at trees. Perhaps we could design it together." Ivy considered this offer carefully before nodding once decisively. She extended her hand formally, which Kate shook with equal seriousness. Only then did Ivy join the celebration, her reserved smile speaking volumes about her cautious acceptance. The wedding plans evolved with community involvement. Pastor Tom offered the church, though Brian and Kate preferred the farmhouse where their story had truly begun. Helen organized a committee of local women to handle arrangements. The girls immersed themselves in planning their roles with characteristic differences, Abby creating detailed schedules, Mia composing original music, Ivy designing programs with delicate illustrations. Not everyone received the news with equal enthusiasm. David Wilson reappeared unexpectedly one Sunday afternoon. 16 months sober, he explained without prompting as he stood awkwardly on the porch. The girls froze at sight of him, Abby moving protectively before her sisters. "I'm not here to cause trouble," David said, raising his palms. "Part of my recovery program requires making amends where possible." Brian invited him inside after confirming the girls felt comfortable proceeding. They sat stiffly in the living room, the children pressed together on the sofa, Brian standing nearby, Kate in the kitchen providing space while remaining available if needed. I failed you, David addressed his daughters directly. There's no excuse for that. I want you to know I recognize the harm I caused. Why now? Abby asked, skepticism evident. Because I couldn't face you before, David admitted. I needed to get sober first. Stay sober. Prove to myself I could be accountable. The conversation progressed carefully, painful history acknowledged without expectation of immediate forgiveness. When David mentioned hearing about their upcoming new family, tension spiked noticeably. We are already a family, Abby corrected firmly. Kate is joining us, not creating us. David nodded, accepting the correction. Of course. I just wanted to say I'm happy you found a good home. People who clearly love you. Before leaving, he left 3 small packages, journals with their birth dates inscribed inside. I can't replace lost time, he explained, but I can share memories from when you were little. Things about your mother you might not know, if you want that someday. His visit created ripples through subsequent weeks. The girls processed his appearance differently. Abby with lingering suspicion, Mia with cautious curiosity, Ivy with quiet contemplation. Kate provided space for their complicated emotions without judgment, sharing from her own experience with her father's late-life attempts at reconciliation. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing, she explained one evening while helping Ivy arrange pressed flowers. Sometimes it just means acknowledging someone's humanity, their capacity to change, while protecting your own boundaries. Their wedding took place the following autumn at the farmhouse. The ceremony, simple yet meaningful, conducted by Pastor Tom, beneath an arch the community helped construct. The girls wore matching blue dresses, like the sky, they had said when selecting the color. Brian and Kate wrote their own vows, speaking honestly about second chances found unexpectedly, about families created through choice, not just circumstance. The girls participated, offering their own promises, spoken with childhood solemnity. We promised to share our dad, Abby began. Most of the time, Mia amended, causing laughter to ripple through gathered friends. And to be a family, Ivy completed quietly. In our own way. No dry eyes remained as Pastor Tom pronounced them husband and wife. The celebration continued into evening, the farmhouse yard filled with lanterns, music, laughter. Brian watched Kate dance with each girl in turn, then with Helen, whose arthritis did not prevent surprising agility. This happiness felt different from his first, yet equally profound. Not replacing, but expanding Hart's capacity exactly as Kate had described. Their life together found rhythm through adjustment and compromise. Kate maintained the bakery, hiring additional help, allowing more family time. Brian's consulting business thrived and allowing him to remain based at home. The girls began school together, navigating that transition with expected challenges but growing confidence. Ivy struggled most with anxiety in the new environment, experiencing panic attacks during the first weeks. The school counselor worked closely with Brian and Kate, developing strategies for managing these episodes. By October, Ivy could identify triggering situations and implement calming techniques, though she remained quieter at school than at home. Mia thrived socially, quickly making friends through her natural enthusiasm and musical talent. She joined choir immediately, began piano lessons through the school's music program, developed particular friendship with Jenny Martinez, who shared her love for Taylor Swift songs. Abby approached school academically, excelling in mathematics and science while remaining reserved in social situations. Her protective instincts transferred to classmates experiencing bullying or exclusion. Teachers noted her unusual maturity, her willingness to advocate for others, her natural leadership qualities. Home life adjusted to new patterns. Kate converted the attic into a master bedroom, giving the girls continued access to their established spaces. Family dinner remained sacrosanct regardless of busy schedules. Sunday afternoons featured hiking expeditions exploring the extensive property surrounding the farmhouse. Their first Christmas as an official family brought surprise announcement. Kate was expecting. The news landed differently with each child. Abby processed analytically, asking practical questions about room arrangements, schedules, implications. Mia responded with immediate excitement, offering name suggestions, volunteering as official baby singer. Ivy withdrew temporarily, processing silently through art, creating images of expanding family circles that revealed her complex emotions. That evening, after the girls went to bed, Kate found Brian sitting alone on the porch despite the December chill. "Second thoughts?" she asked, joining him. "Never," Brian assured her. "Just contemplating how life surprises us. 2 years ago, I was barely functioning. Now here we are." Kate leaned against him. "The girls will adjust. They're remarkably resilient." "I know, but I worry about Ivy. She's finally feeling secure, and now everything changes again." "Change doesn't have to be threatening," Kate replied, "not when the foundation remains solid." Brian wrapped an arm around her. "You're remarkably wise, you know." "Not wise," Kate corrected, "just experienced with rebuilding after loss. Like all of us here." The pregnancy progressed with its own challenges. Kate experienced difficult morning sickness, requiring hospitalization briefly during her second trimester. The girls responded with touching concern, creating elaborate care schedules, ensuring Kate always had companions, entertainment, favorite foods once she could eat again. A more significant hurdle arrived when ultrasound revealed their baby would be a boy. The gender announcement triggered unexpected grief for Brian, memories of Tyler surfacing with painful freshness. Kate found him late one night in what would become the nursery, holding a small blue sleeper, tears streaming unchecked. "I'm sorry," he whispered when she entered. "I should be only happy." "Grief and I often arrive holding hands," Kate said, sitting beside him, "especially when love runs deep. What if I compare them? What if I can't help seeing Tyler when I look at him?" "You will," Kate acknowledged. "How could you not? But seeing echoes of Tyler doesn't mean loving this child less. It means honoring the connections between past and future." The conversation continued late into night, fears voiced without judgment, remembered joy celebrated alongside acknowledged loss. This pattern of honest communication sustained them through pregnancy's final months as they prepared heart and home for new arrival. The girls accompanied Kate to appointments, hearing heartbeats, seeing ultrasound images, asking endless questions about fetal development. They helped prepare the nursery painting walls, arranging furniture, selecting books and toys. When they learned definitively the baby would be a boy, Abby organized a special dinner. "To celebrate our brother," she announced, raising her glass of sparkling cider. "Who will have the three best sisters in the world to protect him?" Kate squeezed Brian's hand under the table, eyes glistening with tears. These moments of acceptance continued to move her deeply. The genuine welcome from children who had every reason to guard their territory fiercely. Lucas Foster arrived during a December snowstorm, appropriately dramatic entrance for the newest family member. Brian drove through treacherous conditions, Kate breathing through contractions in the passenger seat, the girls staying behind with Helen monitoring the phone anxiously. The labor progressed rapidly, Lucas entering the world shortly after midnight, healthy, loud, demanding immediate attention. When Brian brought the girls to meet their brother the next morning, three faces peered into the hospital bassinet with expressions of wonder. "He's so small," Mia whispered. "All babies are small," Abby replied, though her usual confidence seemed temporarily shaken by the newborn's fragility. "Can I hold him?" Ivy asked, surprising everyone with her directness. Kate arranged Ivy in the chair, placing Lucas carefully in her arms, showing her how to support his head. The connection was immediate, Lucas settling contentedly against his sister's chest, Ivy's expression transforming into protective adoration. Each girl took turns holding him, making solemn promises about teachings, protections, future adventures. Bringing Lucas home completed a circle Brian had never imagined possible years earlier when purchasing the abandoned farmhouse. The structure, once empty and broken, now overflowed with life, laughter, occasional chaos. The girls adjusted to midnight feedings, crying jags, shared parental attention with maturity beyond their years. The transition wasn't without difficulties. Mia experienced unexpected jealousy when Kate's attention necessarily focused on infant needs. Abby became hyper-vigilant about household safety, implementing elaborate precautions, sometimes bordering on excessive. Ivy retreated periodically into artistic projects requiring solitude and silence. Brian found himself navigating these reactions while managing his own sleep deprivation, emotional adjustments, recurrent grief triggered by Lucas's similarities to Tyler. Kate demonstrated remarkable patience during these months, balancing newborn demands with continued attention to the girls' needs. She instituted special time with each daughter weekly, ensuring individual connection amid family chaos. These moments became sacred. Mia's Tuesday afternoon music sessions, Abby's Thursday evening engineering projects, Ivy's Sunday morning art explorations. By Lucas's first birthday, equilibrium had largely returned. The girls incorporated him naturally into their dynamic. Abby teaching him words with flashcards, Mia singing elaborate made-up songs that made him giggle, Ivy creating colorful mobiles capturing his attention for lengthy periods. He developed distinct relationships with each sister, seemingly understanding their individual personalities despite his limited verbal skills. Time accelerated in the way it does when raising children. Days blurred into weeks, into months, into years marked by milestones, photographs, height measurements on the kitchen doorframe. Lucas grew from infant to toddler to child, surrounded by adoring sisters who alternately spoiled and instructed him. He developed personality blending Kate's gentle patience with Brian's analytical mind, alongside uniquely his own determined independence. The girls navigated adolescence supported by their unusual family structure. They faced typical teenage challenges amplified by their complex history. Brian and Kate maintained open communication, creating space for difficult conversations, questions about identity, belonging, reconciling past with present. At 13, Abby began researching her birth mother extensively, seeking connection with the woman whose memory had begun fading. Kate supported this exploration, helping locate Rachel's college friends, collecting stories, photographs, building bridges to the past. One evening, after discovering a cache of old letters, Abby approached Kate with uncharacteristic hesitancy. "Were you ever afraid I would love her more if I remembered her better?" Kate considered the question thoughtfully. "I never saw it as competition. Your mother gave you life, nurtured you, taught you to protect your sisters. My love for you builds upon that foundation, doesn't replace it. But some people might feel threatened." "Love doesn't diminish when shared," Kate replied. "It multiplies. Your connection to Rachel makes you who you are. How could I wish that different?" The conversation marked a turning point in their relationship. Abby began sharing discoveries about Rachel more openly, integrating memories into present without fear of causing pain or division. Mia experienced her challenging phase at 14, testing boundaries, pushing limits, seeking independence through occasional rebellion. Her musical talent provided both outlet and occasional flashpoint as she prioritized band performances over family obligations. During one particularly heated argument, she shouted at Brian, "You don't understand what music means to me." "I understand more than you realize," Brian responded calmly. "I lost music once after Allison and Tyler died. Couldn't bear to hear it, play it, feel it. You helped me find it again, Mia. I'll never take that from you. I just ask for balance." The honesty disarmed her anger, opening pathways to resolution. Their relationship evolved through these confrontations into deeper understanding based on shared passion rather than merely authority. Ivy's challenges manifested differently. Her artistic sensitivity sometimes overwhelmed social interactions, leading to anxiety in group settings. She preferred solitude to crowded activities, sometimes using headphones to create necessary space within busy household. Kate recognized similar patterns from her own youth, providing strategies, support without pressure. Ivy's artwork matured, becoming increasingly sophisticated, gaining recognition beyond their small town. Lucas observed his sisters navigating these complex waters with fascination, occasionally bewilderment, consistent devotion. Having 3 additional parental figures besides Brian and Kate shaped him differently than standard family structures might have. He developed unusual emotional intelligence alongside typical boyhood interests in dinosaurs, construction vehicles, imaginary adventures. When Lucas entered kindergarten, the family faced unexpected challenge. During parent-teacher conference, his teacher expressed concern about his tendency to correct classmates about family structures. He becomes quite insistent that families come in many forms, Mrs. Rodriguez explained. While that's certainly true, he sometimes disrupts lessons to explain his unusual situation. Brian and Kate exchanged glances, recognizing the deeper issue. Lucas had absorbed family narrative but lacked context for understanding its uniqueness. Together, they developed age-appropriate explanations, helping Lucas understand his family's story without feeling defensive about differences. "Families grow in different ways," Kate explained using illustrations Ivy created. Some through birth, some through marriage, some through adoption. The important parts are love, commitment, showing up for each other. Lucas internalized this wisdom, developing remarkably mature ability to articulate family complexity when relevant, while recognizing appropriate boundaries for sharing personal information. Graduations arrived, marking passages of time. Abby valedictorian speaking eloquently about resilience, mentioning obliquely the journey that brought her to that podium. Mia performing original composition at commencement, bringing audience to tears without knowing full story behind the music. Ivy creating senior art installation titled 3, exploring themes of sisterhood, protection, transformation. College choices scattered them geographically for first time since finding one another. Abby pursuing education degree at State University, determined to support children facing trauma or displacement. Mia attending music conservatory 3 states away, balancing performance with music therapy interests. Ivy accepting art school scholarship in Coastal City, focusing on installation art, exploring themes of belonging, identity, chosen family. The separation proved challenging yet necessary step toward individual identities while maintaining unbreakable connection. Sunday video calls became sacred tradition, connecting disparate locations into virtual family circle. Holiday gatherings acquired heightened significance once absence made togetherness precious commodity. Lucas experienced sister's departure differently at various developmental stages. At 8, he demanded daily updates, sent elaborate care packages to each sister, counted days until visits with calendar markings. By 12, he navigated more independent relationship with each sister, developing unique connection based on shared interests rather than merely proximity. Brian and Kate facilitated these evolving relationships while ensuring Lucas developed his own identity, separate from role as the little brother. Sunday dinners remained tradition whenever possible. Seats filled around farmhouse table, now weathered by years of use marked by art projects, science experiments, countless shared meals. Brian and Kate established open-door policy for holidays, expanding to accommodate boyfriends, girlfriends, eventually fiancés, spouses, grandchildren. The farmhouse stretched, embraced, evolved alongside family it sheltered. Lucas grew into thoughtful young man, navigating high school, then college path, different yet parallel to his sisters. He inherited Brian's analytical mind, Kate's compassion, interesting blend alongside uniquely his own characteristics. The age gap between him and his sisters created different dynamic, special connection, protected space to develop without direct comparison. 25 years passed like seasons changing gradually yet suddenly complete. Brian, now silver-haired, still tall, still strong, stood on farmhouse porch watching cars arrive for anniversary celebration. Kate beside him, her hand in his familiar, comfortable essential. The farmhouse had transformed completely over decades, renovated, expanded, maintained with loving care. The property surrounding it similarly nurtured gardens, orchard, workshop space for Ivy's larger sculptures. Abby arrived first, naturally punctual, bringing her husband Michael, 2 children, Emma and James. She had become elementary school principal, locally respected community leader, carrying forward educational passion, first sparked during her own complicated childhood. Her organizational skills translated perfectly to administration, while her experience with trauma informed compassionate approach to troubled students. Mia followed fashionably late with guitarist husband Tony, whose touring band kept flexible schedule, occasionally including Mia's performances. Her music career had found balance between artistic expression, commercial success, teaching. Their daughter Sophia already showed musical inclination, picking up instruments, exploring sounds with natural curiosity inherited from both parents. Ivy and her wife Christina arrived with their newly adopted son Noah, culmination of years navigating complicated adoption process. Ivy's art gallery in town displayed local talent, alongside her increasingly sought-after pieces exploring themes of family, belonging, chosen connections. Her childhood anxiety had evolved into quiet confidence, secure identity shared with partner, who complemented her creative spirit with practical grounding. Lucas, home from graduate studies environmental engineering, arrived with a girlfriend Elise, photographs, stories, professional path beginning to crystallize, combining Brian's structural knowledge with contemporary sustainability focus. His easy conversation bridged generations, connecting grandparents, siblings, cousins with natural diplomacy. They gathered on lawn professional photographer, Arranging groupings, capturing moments, continuing narratives started decades earlier. Extended family, friends, community members who had witnessed, supported, participated in their collective journey joined celebration. Pastor Tom, now retired, leaning on cane. Helen's daughter representing mother, long past but never forgotten. Nancy and husband gray-haired, still teaching. The tapestry of connection stretched wide, deep, complex, beautiful. As formal photographs concluded, Abby pulled Brian aside, leading him toward ancient apple tree where he had proposed to Kate years earlier. The tree now massive, spreading branches providing shade for multiple generations playing beneath. Abby's expression, thoughtful, mature, yet containing echoes of 8-year-old girl once encountered in abandoned farmhouse corner. "I've been thinking about full circles," she said, "about journeys ending where they began yet completely transformed." Brian nodded, understanding her philosophical bent, natural inclination toward meaning-making. 25 years ago, you found 3 terrified little girls hiding in your empty house." Abby continued, voice steady despite emotion beneath surface. "You had every logical reason to call authorities, to walk away from complexity we represented." "Logic rarely determines the most important decisions," Brian replied. Abby studied the gathering spread across lawn family they had built together from unlikely beginning. "What made you decide to keep us that first night?" Brian considered question he'd pondered countless times through decades. "Something in your determination to stay together. Something in your courage facing impossible circumstances. Something in myself needing purpose beyond grief." "I used to think we were lucky," Abby said thoughtfully. "Now I understand it wasn't luck, but recognition. Broken recognizing broken. Healing recognizing potential for healing." She embraced him, then adult woman encompassing father who had once seemed impossibly tall, strong to small girl. "Thank you for seeing possibility when others would have seen only problems." Brian returned, embrace, throat tight with emotion. "Thank you for teaching me family transcends conventional definitions, for helping me understand love persists beyond loss." They walked back toward gathered family, Kate immediately sensing emotional moment, wrapping arm around Brian's waist. Lucas calling everyone for additional photographs. Mia tuning guitar, preparing surprise musical tribute. Ivy arranging children, grandchildren into artistic grouping, capturing meaning beyond merely aesthetic arrangement. As sun began setting behind distant mountains, painting sky crimson gold, deepening purple. Brian surveyed gathering. The empty, broken man who purchased abandoned property seeking isolation could never have imagined this outcome. Could never have predicted 3 small girls would crack open his shattered heart, allowing light to enter once again. Could never have foreseen family built from fragments, growing, expanding, thriving through decades. Brian Foster stood surrounded by 4 generations, his hands still firmly clasped with Kate's after all these years. Allison and Tyler remained present in memory photographs, stories shared with Lucas' later grandchildren. Rachel similarly honored through traditions, photographs, Abby's middle name given to firstborn daughter. Their family encompassed past, present, stretched toward future, embracing complexity, acknowledging pain, celebrating joy, finding meaning through connection. The photographer called for final group photograph, everyone gathering beneath apple tree, now massive ancient witness to their collective journey. "Everyone together, please. Big smiles on 3. Brian looked at assembled faces, each carrying part of his heart, each contributing thread to tapestry, woven together, creating something stronger, more beautiful than individual strands alone could produce. 1, 2, 3. Camera captured moment, preserving it alongside countless others, marking passages, celebrating continuity, honoring journey from abandoned house to vibrant home, from broken individuals to family bound by choice. Commitment. Love that transcended conventional definitions, biological connections, traditional narratives. As gathering continued into evening, farmhouse windows glowing warmly against deepening twilight, Brian found moment alone on porch step. Stars emerging overhead, same stars that witnessed his arrival decades earlier, broken, grieving, seeking only escape from pain. Instead, universe had other plans, sending 3 small warriors disguised as frightened children to save him from despair. Contemplating the universe, Kate asked, joining him, stars reflecting, in eyes still captivating after all their years together. "Contemplating improbable journeys," Brian replied, drawing her close. "How abandoned houses become homes. How strangers become family. How broken pieces assemble into something stronger than original whole. Kate leaned against his shoulder, their bodies fitting together with comfort born from years shared experience. From emptiness to fullness. From isolation to connection. From ending to beginning. Brian nodded, watching their grandchildren chase fireflies across same lawn where their mothers had done identical thing decades earlier. Time circular, spiraling forward, yet connecting back, treasuring past while creating future. The best homes, Brian said softly, are built from broken pieces carefully gathered, lovingly assembled stronger at mended places than they ever were before. Kate's hand found his familiar gesture containing history future simultaneously. Inside farmhouse laughter music conversation mingled together, symphony of family, Brian had once thought forever lost to him. Once empty house, now overflowed with legacy continued through generations, proving family transcends biology, circumstance, limitation. Sometimes created precisely where least expected, discovered in abandoned corners, fashioned from discarded possibilities. Sometimes exactly what we need finds us, when we have given up searching, offering salvation, disguised as three small girls, making promise to stay together no matter what. Brian wrapped arm around Kate, gratitude overwhelming words, watching their family illuminate night with presence. Light expanded, never diminished by sharing, only growing, brighter with each passing year. Each new connection, each moment recognized, treasured, celebrated as miracle, it truly was.